Hi guys, welcome back to Flexibility Fridays. Today's video is going to be about center splits. So center splits is something that I found really hard to master. I would always get to a certain point on my split and I wouldn't feel anything that I would class as a stretch. There was nothing through the front of my leg here, but I would feel like a jamming in the back of my hips. And in a traditional dance class, there's a lot of focus when you're trying to get a center split on stretching out the adductor. I was already really flexible through there. I actually needed to get into the deep hip behind. So what we're going to do today is we are going to do a little bit of adductor stuff that targets that as well, but we're going to really try and do an all-rounded stretch so that we're getting into all the muscle groups that we need to make flexible for a effective, safe center split.
So just a starting reference point, this is where my center splits sit if I've had a very, very light warm up. As you can see, there is a little gap between my hip and the floor, and that's what we're going to try and close today. So the first exercise we're going to do is a butterfly stretch. So I'm doing a little bit of resistance and pushing my knee and my hand back against each other, giving equal pressure through both directions. I'm going to hold each position for 10 seconds. At the end of the 10 seconds, I'm going to relax my leg and breathe out. And as I breathe out, I'm just going to let it drop a little bit lower, guiding it with my hand. So I'm not pushing it down, I'm just letting it release and go lower. So I'm just going to repeat this 3 times on each side. So just as a check-in point for comparison, you can see that my left leg has dropped significantly lower than my right leg. So we're just going to even that up now. So coming back to center to check our progress, you can see that my legs have now pretty much evened up. So the next thing I'm going to do is a little bit of a plie in second, but I am just letting my hips drop quite low in this. I'm just going to gently twist it from side to side, pushing back against that knee with my working arm, and swapping to the other side. So the next exercise we're going to do, we start off in a half fold, turned out. So feet facing out to the corners, and I'm just doing a little bit of a pulse here. You're trying to find the length through your spine, letting your head hang heavy towards the ground. So I'm just setting my hands up on the floor, and I'm going to sink my hips down towards the ground, sinking them lower into a bit of a yoga squat here. So this position always feels a little bit ridiculous to do. You are really just setting yourself up like a frog, but it is one of the most effective ones I've found for your center splits and for getting into that deep hip stretch. So what I'm doing is I'm just tipping forward, letting my elbows naturally stretch my knees back. So for me, my head rests on the ground here. If yours does not, that is absolutely fine. It's all just stages and what feels like a stretch for you. So I'm just going to hold it here for a little bit, and you'll be able to feel your hips just releasing in this position. I'm going to tip back, just resetting, seeing if I can get a little bit more turnout, and I'm going to tip forward again and repeat. So I do 3 repetitions of this position, and each time I go back down, I'm trying to just sink a little bit further into the stretch. So after the last repetition, I'm just going to put the pressure down into my hands. I'm going to send my hips up towards the ceiling, back up into my half fold position. So for this next exercise, I set myself up in a low lunge, and then I take my front foot to the outside of my opposite hand and straighten both legs. From there, I drop my hip forward, letting it sink towards the ground, and I straighten back up, pushing my back heel towards the floor. So I repeat this 3 times on each leg, and you should feel a nice strong stretch along the outside of your hip. So setting up here for the second side, and this is where you can really see that I do have one hip that is a lot more flexible than the other. On this side, I can get a lot further to the ground a lot more easily. Asymmetries like this in the body are super common. It's kind of like being right-handed or left-handed. And basically in dance, we just want to close the gap as much as possible. So if you find that you have a side that you can do things more easily on, that is more flexible, that is stronger, you just want to spend a little bit of extra time on your less dominant side to bring it up to the same level. So the final exercise we're going to do today is probably the most advanced that we've done. We're just going to start setting ourselves up in a downward dog, pressing our shoulders back towards our thighs. From there, we're going to lift our leg up into a supported penché. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to play around with my hip positioning here, just loosening it up, working through different rotations. I then drop my foot across the body towards my opposite shoulder. And I'm going to come forward to the outside of the shoulder, keeping my knee bent, and rock forward, shoulders over the top of the hands, up, doing a full circle with my knee. Now bringing it up to the top, I'm just going to do a couple of circles one way and then back the other with my knee, drawing circles in the air, and I'm really just having to move the leg inside the hip socket. I'm now going to bring my knee forward to the center of my chest and then bring it up towards the outside, stacking the hips one on top of the other. So I'm just doing the same move from before, but taking it back in the opposite direction. So I'm just going back into that supported penché position, and I'm just going to try a couple of different rotations here through my hips, just finding that freedom of mobility. And I'm coming back down into downward dog, and from there transitioning into a child's pose just to give the shoulders a little bit of a break before we go into the other side. So that brings us to the end of our center splits video. This is my after result. So as you can see, that gap that I had between my hip and the floor has now closed, and I can easily lie in a flat center split. Now a question I get asked quite often is, what is the correct way to do center splits? Is it with the knees facing up or the knees facing forward? The answer is that both are actually correct. It depends on the positioning of your hips. So the way that I'm lying at the moment with my hips over and forward, knees forward is correct. If I were to come up to seated position, where my hips are flat and facing upwards, knees facing the ceiling would be correct, because that is the turned out position in line with my hip positioning. Thanks for tuning into Flexibility Fridays. I'll see you guys next week.